The yard sounded normal at first. A cardinal somewhere near the fence line. Chickadees moving through the maple branches in quick, restless bursts. The soft, clicking sound of sparrows under the feeder, kicking through the gravel for fallen seed. Morning light stretched across the grass in long, pale bands, still low enough that the dew hadn't burned away yet. You stepped outside with your coffee still warm in your hand, and for a few seconds, everything felt exactly the way it always had. Familiar. Quiet in the comforting way backyards are quiet before the neighborhood fully wakes up. Then something changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. A blue jay called from somewhere deeper in the trees behind the yard. Loud. Sharp. The kind of call you usually ignore because blue jays are always loud about something. But this one didn't stop. It came again. And again. You noticed the chickadees freeze mid-movement high in the branches. One of them turned its head sharply toward the woods. Then another. The feeder went still. The tiny scratching sounds beneath it disappeared. Even the cardinal stopped singing. It happened so quickly, you almost questioned whether the yard had really been noisy a moment before. And yet the silence that followed felt strangely heavy, like something settling over the space around you. You felt it before you understood it. That small tightening in your stomach people rarely talk about, because it sounds irrational once you try to explain it out loud. The feeling that something nearby had shifted. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to learn will change the way you listen to the birds outside your window forever. Most people think birds are simply reacting to danger when they suddenly go quiet. A hawk overhead. A cat moving through the bushes. Something simple. But the deeper researchers have studied backyard bird communication, the stranger it has become. Because sometimes the calls begin before anything visible appears at all. And what happened next in that yard that morning is the part that still feels difficult to explain even now. The blue jay called one more time from the trees. Then every bird in the yard turned in the exact same direction at once. You have probably felt this before without realizing how deeply it stayed with you afterward. A yard full of sounds suddenly going still. Birds vanishing from the feeder for reasons you could not explain. That strange moment when the air itself seems to pause, and every living thing around you notices it before you do. Most people brush those moments away almost immediately. They tell themselves it was nothing. Just birds being birds. Just a coincidence. But the feeling lingers anyway. You remember the silence long after the morning is over. You remember the way your eyes search the trees without fully knowing why. And maybe the strangest part is how quickly your body reacts before your mind catches up. Your breathing changes slightly. Your shoulders tense. You stop moving without deciding to stop moving. Somewhere deep beneath conscious thought, something inside you recognizes the shift too. That is the part most people never talk about. The quiet instinct humans still carry. The same instinct that once helped people sense storms before the clouds rolled in, or wake suddenly in the middle of the night moments before something changed outside. And this is where things begin to feel strangely personal. Because the birds in your yard are not reacting randomly. They are constantly reading movement, sound, posture, rhythm. A squirrel freezing on a fence post. A shadow crossing the edge of the trees. Footsteps approaching from 2 houses away. They notice tiny disruptions most humans move through without ever seeing. But every now and then, you feel it too. Not logically. Not clearly. Just enough to know the morning no longer feels the same as it did a minute ago. And the blue jay in the trees still had not stopped calling. The strange thing is that the birds had already understood something long before people ever did. Not emotionally. Not symbolically. Physically. Practically. The blue jay was not making noise for the sake of noise. Neither were the chickadees that had disappeared deeper into the branches above the yard. Every movement meant something to the others nearby. Every call carried information. Most mornings you never notice it because the system works quietly beneath the surface of ordinary life. A robin pulling worms from the lawn pauses and lifts its head for half a second. Somewhere above it, a nuthatch changes direction on the bark of an oak tree. A cardinal stops singing before anything visible enters the yard. Tiny adjustments. Tiny warnings. One bird notices movement. Another notices posture. Another notices silence itself. And within seconds, the entire yard changes shape around information humans cannot yet see. Researchers eventually discovered that many backyard birds are constantly listening to species that are not even their own. Chickadees react to blue jay alarms. Sparrows monitor robins. Finches pause when crows go quiet. The yard is not separate groups of animals sharing space. It is a network. A living system built from thousands of tiny signals exchanged all day long above your head without you ever realizing it. And once you begin noticing it, you cannot stop. The blue jay calls differently when a hawk circles high above the neighborhood. Chickadees move differently when a cat slips beneath the shrubs. Even the rhythm of feeding changes depending on how safe the yard feels that morning. But what feels unsettling is not the fact that birds warn each other. It is how often those warnings begin before anything visible has happened at all. The trees behind the yard still looked empty. The morning light still rested softly across the grass. And yet every bird out there already knew something had changed. What makes this even harder to dismiss is that researchers eventually realized the birds were not simply reacting faster than humans. In many cases, they were reacting to details humans were not consciously detecting at all. A chickadee can distinguish between dozens of subtle sound variations inside another bird's alarm call. The difference between a slow-moving thread and a fast-moving one can change the entire pattern of sound spreading through the trees. A crow remembers individual human faces for years. Blue jays track movement through layers of branches humans barely notice. And perhaps strangest of all, birds often respond to body tension before obvious movement ever happens. A person walking calmly through a yard creates one pattern. A person distracted, anxious, or moving with sudden uneven energy creates another. Most people never realize how visible emotion becomes in physical behavior until they watch animals react to it. The coffee in your hand had gone almost cold now. The yard remained suspended in that same uneasy stillness while the blue jay shifted somewhere high in the trees where you still could not fully see it. Then came another sound. Not loud. Just the faint, rapid flutter of wings deeper in the branches behind the fence line, followed by the soft ticking alarm calls of chickadees moving farther away from the yard altogether. This is the part researchers describe carefully because even they seem unsettled by how coordinated these reactions become. Entire groups of birds can change feeding behavior in less than 2 seconds after a single warning call. Not gradually, instantly, as though dozens of separate animals briefly become one shared nervous system. And once you understand that, something about those quiet mornings begins to feel different forever. Because the birds outside your window may be noticing far more about the world around you than you ever realized. After a while, the yard slowly began breathing again. Not fully, not normally, just enough for you to notice the tension easing in small, careful increments. A single sparrow returned first, landing near the edge of the feeder instead of directly beneath it. Then another. The blue jay had gone quiet now, though you could still hear branches shifting softly deeper in the trees behind the fence line. The cardinal did not sing again. It simply remained there on the same low branch facing the yard, feathers slightly lifted against the cool morning air. Watching. And this is where something subtle begins happening between people and the birds around them, especially if they spend enough mornings outside to notice these tiny repetitions. The birds start recognizing patterns in you the same way you begin recognizing patterns in them. The way you open the back door slowly instead of suddenly. The time you step outside. Each morning within the same 10-minute window. The fact that you pause near the feeder instead of walking directly toward it. Little things. Ordinary things. But birds live inside details that small. Over time, the yard remembers you. Chickadees stop fleeing the second you appear. A robin keeps searching the grass while you stand 20 feet away holding your coffee. A finch lands before you have even moved back toward the house. The trust forms gradually enough that most people never notice the exact moment it changes. But the birds do. They begin measuring your presence differently. And maybe that is why moments like this feel strangely personal when the atmosphere shifts around you. Because by then, you are no longer just a stranger passing through the yard. You have become part of the environment the birds are constantly reading. Part of the rhythm they quietly monitor every morning beneath the branches and pale early light. And on mornings when something feels wrong, they react to your presence differently too. The unsettling part is that once you begin noticing these patterns, they start appearing everywhere. Not just on mornings like this one. Not just during obvious danger. You begin realizing the birds react to changes in ways that feel strangely ahead of the moment itself. Before heavy rain, the feeder empties almost an hour earlier than usual. Before a storm front reaches the neighborhood, the robins disappear from the lawn and the chickadees retreat lower into dense cover beneath the cedar branches. Even the air sounds different when it happens. Softer, held back somehow. But there are other moments that feel harder to explain cleanly. Days when you step outside carrying tension you have not fully admitted to yourself yet, and the yard reacts with unusual caution. The sparrows stay farther back. The cardinal watches from a distance instead of landing near the feeder. A crow appears silently on the telephone wire and remains there longer than feels normal, studying the yard with that stillness crows have that can almost feel human if you look too long. Maybe it is only body language. Maybe birds are reading tiny physical signals humans barely notice in one another. Changes in pace, breathing, posture. Researchers would probably explain it that way. And yet something about those moments continues to linger in people long afterward because the timing often feels too precise to dismiss completely. This is where things begin shifting from simple observation into something quieter and far more difficult to put into words. The feeling that the living world around you is responding to conditions you have not consciously recognized yet yourself. The maple leaves above the yard moved gently in the wind now, sunlight flickering through them in soft, uneven patterns across the grass. Somewhere high beyond the trees, another blue jay suddenly called out again. But this time, it sounded farther away, as if whatever the birds had been reacting to was slowly moving through the neighborhood toward somewhere else. Many people who spend years paying close attention to birds eventually begin describing the same strange feeling in different ways. Not that birds predict the future. Not exactly. But that they seem connected to shifts in the world before human awareness fully catches up to them. The old farmers who watched swallows flying low before storms arrived. The people who noticed their yard falling silent moments before an earthquake tremor they could not yet feel. The quiet instinct some people have to stop and look around when every bird nearby suddenly disappears into cover at once. Researchers would say birds are simply more sensitive to pressure changes, vibration, sound frequencies, movement patterns. And they are probably right. But something about this still feels difficult to ignore once you have experienced it enough times yourself. Because humans carry traces of those same instincts too. You felt it that morning before you understood it logically. The silence reached your body first. The birds noticed something. Then somewhere inside you, something noticed the birds. The connection happened almost instantly. And maybe that is why moments like these stay with people for years afterward. They remind us that beneath all the noise of modern life, living things are still communicating constantly through tension, rhythm, movement, stillness, through signals older than language itself. The yard had nearly returned to normal now. A chickadee darted back toward the feeder in a blur of gray and white. Sunlight warmed the top of the fence posts. Somewhere farther down the block, a dog barked once and then stopped. But the feeling from earlier had not completely disappeared. It lingered softly beneath the morning like the last vibration of a sound you can no longer hear directly. And perhaps that is the strangest part of all. Not that the birds were warning each other, but that for a brief moment, you understood the warning too. By late morning, the yard sounded ordinary again. The feeder swayed lightly in the breeze. Sparrows scratched beneath it in small, uneven circles through the gravel. Somewhere across the neighborhood, a lawn mower started and faded into the distance. If someone else had stepped outside at that moment, they probably would have noticed nothing unusual at all. But you would have known the feeling had changed. Not disappeared, just settled deeper. The cardinal finally left the branch near the fence in one smooth flash of red disappearing through the maple leaves, and for a long moment afterward, the branch continued moving gently after the bird was gone. It is strange how small details stay with people. The exact direction every bird looked before the silence fell. The way the yard seemed to hold its breath. The feeling that something invisible had passed through the space around you, touching every living thing for only a few seconds before moving on. Maybe that is why so many people become quiet after experiences like this instead of talking about them immediately. Some moments resist explanation because explaining them too quickly makes them feel smaller than they actually were. And this was never really about fear. Sitting there now with the morning light warming the grass and the coffee nearly cold in your hand, the feeling underneath it all was something softer than fear. Awareness, maybe. The realization that the world around you is far more connected and attentive than most people allow themselves to notice anymore. Above the yard, the branches moved slowly against the pale blue sky. A chickadee landed near the feeder again, light enough that the metal barely shifted beneath its weight. And for the first time all morning, the yard no longer felt like background noise. It felt alive in a way that was difficult to fully explain once you had finally seen it. That evening, long after the yard had settled back into its ordinary rhythms, you found yourself looking outside again without fully meaning to. The light had faded into that soft blue-gray color that only lasts a few minutes before night completely takes over. The feeder moved gently in the evening wind. Tree shadows stretched long across the grass. Somewhere far down the block, a mourning dove gave one last low call before the neighborhood slowly disappeared into quiet. And for a moment, you remembered the way the birds had all turned together that morning. The same direction, the same silence, the same invisible awareness passing through them all at once like a signal moving through water. Most people spend their entire lives believing they are separate from the living world around them, as though nature exists somewhere outside the edges of human life, instead of all around it every second. But mornings like that have a strange way of dissolving that illusion, because the birds were never simply decorating the background of your life. They were observing it, responding to it, measuring changes in the world around you long before words ever entered the picture. And perhaps somewhere deep beneath all the noise and distraction of modern life, part of you was still doing the same thing too. Maybe that is why moments of sudden silence feel so powerful when they happen. Not because they are supernatural, not because the birds are magical, but because they remind us that instinct is still alive inside every living thing willing to listen closely enough. The branches outside your window moved softly in the dark now, almost blending into the night itself. Somewhere beyond the trees, a single bird called once and then fell quiet again. Maybe it was only another ordinary sound drifting through the neighborhood after sunset. But it never really feels like only a sound once you have begun paying attention. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If stories like this speak to something quiet inside you, subscribe before you leave, because there are still so many things happening just outside our windows that most people never truly stop to notice. And somewhere out there tonight, beyond the porch lights and sleeping streets, small living voices are still passing warnings through the dark while the rest of the world sleeps beneath them.